My name is Clara Marin, 28 years old, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that birthdays in our family are never really about the person they're meant to celebrate. It was my mother's 51st, the kind of evening that should have been simple, warm, maybe even healing. But in our house, warmth always carried a warning label. The dining room smelled like roast beef, red wine, and forced affection. My father sat at the head of the table, commanding the room the way he always did, as though applause might start if he spoke long enough. Beside him, my younger sister Amanda glowed under the soft light, wearing that familiar expression, part innocence, part entitlement, the look of someone who knew she'd already won the night. I'd spent years funding her dreams, her tuition, her rent, her gas money, and now, apparently, the next item on her wish list was my patience. For the first half hour, things were fine. Laughter, small talk, my mother smiling just enough to hide the exhaustion behind her eyes. Then, like clockwork, Dad shifted the spotlight. "You know, Amanda's been doing so well in college," he said, voice booming over the clinking glasses. "She's juggling 2 part-time jobs, keeping her grades up. That's what real work looks like." The table murmured in approval. My aunts nodded. My cousins smiled politely. I chewed my food and stared at the candle flame in front of me. He wasn't done. He never was. "I'm proud of her," he continued. "Proud of how she's pushing herself. She's going to go places." Amanda pretended to blush, lowering her eyes, as if she hadn't heard this exact sermon at every dinner for the past 3 years. Then his gaze slid to me. "And you, Clara," he said. "Are you helping your sister enough?" The words hit like a sudden draft through an open window. I blinked. "Helping her?" "Yes," he said. "She's got a lot on her plate. I hope you're still supporting her the way you promised." Before I could even answer, Amanda jumped in, sweet as honey. "She's been great, Dad, really," she said. "Actually, I was hoping to ask her something tonight." That was the first red flag. Her voice a touch too casual, eyes darting toward me. "Oh?" Dad leaned forward, eager. "What is it, sweetheart?" Amanda turned to me, almost apologetic. "I've been thinking about getting a car. Something small. It would really help me get to work and classes on time." The room went quiet, and in that silence, I could already hear the setup. Dad didn't miss a beat. "So, Clara," he said, "you think you could help your sister with that?" For a moment, I actually laughed, softly, disbelievingly. "Are you serious? If she needs a car, why don't you buy it for her?" The air shifted, sharp and electric. Dad's fork hit the table. He leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "You really can't do that for your own sister?" I set my glass down slowly. "I already do enough. If she wants a car, that's on her." It was quiet long enough for me to hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then Dad's voice rose, first steady, then cracking open with anger. "You know, Amanda has potential. She could be somebody, but she needs help. Your help. You think you're too good to lift a finger. And for what? You're selfish, Clara. That's why she'll go farther than you ever will." My chest went cold. There it was. The comparison, the verdict, the familiar knife twisted again. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I'd start shouting. "Well," I said, standing up, "if she's better than me, then she can start paying her own rent." He went red instantly. "Get out," he snapped. "Dad," my mother began. "No," he barked. "If she wants to be selfish, she doesn't need to be here. Get out of my house, Clara." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even Amanda froze, her mouth open, unsure how far she wanted her little game to go. I smiled, small, cutting, tired. "Fine. Happy birthday, Mom." Then I walked out before anyone could see my hands shaking. Upstairs in my old room, I packed the few things I'd brought, hearing the muffled chaos below, voices rising, plates clinking, the usual aftershock of my father's rage. But I didn't go back down. I'd learned long ago that no one wins arguments in this family. They just survive them. That night, I stared at the ceiling, half expecting my mother to knock. She didn't. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Amanda. I let it ring twice before answering. "What the hell was that?" she demanded. "You embarrassed Dad. You made everything awkward." I said nothing. "I was counting on you," she continued, voice cracking now. "And you just... what? Walk out like none of us matter?" 7 minutes. That's how long she went on before I hung up without a word. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Mom stood there, arms folded, eyes tired. "You have to fix this," she said. "Fix what?" I muttered. "Your father was angry. He didn't mean what he said." I laughed. "He meant every word." "Clara," she sighed, stepping inside, "you know how he gets. He says things he doesn't mean. He told me to leave and never come back, I said. How am I supposed to pretend that was just a bad mood? She rubbed her temples, her voice softening. I just don't want this to get worse. It already is worse, I said, staring at the floor. But that's fine. I'll make it easier for him. Her head snapped up. Clara, don't do anything you'll regret. I didn't answer, and after a long moment, she just sighed and left. When the door clicked shut, I sat on my bed in silence, staring at my phone. It was strange. The calm that followed a storm you'd lived through too many times. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty, just tired. That evening, I opened my banking app and scrolled through the transactions. Amanda's rent, tuition payments, meal deliveries, everything under my name. I'd been quietly funding her entire life, and somehow I was still the selfish one. So I made a decision. The next morning, I transferred every last dollar out of our shared account. For once, I didn't hesitate. The first ping hit at 7:12 a.m. Amanda, did you take money out of the account? I stared at the screen, at the audacity of it, at the way she wrote it like a landlord to a delinquent tenant. I typed back, "It's my money." I decided to stop sharing it. Then I set the phone face down and made coffee so slowly it felt like prayer. Less than a minute later, the screen lit up again. Call from Amanda. I let it ring into the carpet. A voicemail formed like a bruise. Then another text. I needed this. What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Or what's wrong with the way you've learned to lean on me until I forget how to stand? I took my mug to the window and watched the light crawl up the neighboring building. For a moment I felt lighter, like I'd quietly stepped out of a net I hadn't realized was strangling me. By noon, the storm arrived. Mom's name flashed. I answered. Clara, she said, voice already in apology mode. He's here. Of course he was. When I stepped into the living room, Richard Marin was planted in the center like a flag in conquered ground, arms crossed, jaw working. Mom hovered by the wall, wringing a dish towel that didn't belong to this room. Fix this, he said. I leaned against the doorway. Fix what? You know what? His voice hummed with contained rage, the kind that always found a target. Your sister's rent is due. You're not leaving Amanda out on the street. I tilted my head. Didn't you say you'd pay it? A flicker. A twitch along his temple. I thought you'd come to your senses before it came to that. Well, I said, I didn't. For a second, I braced for detonation. Instead, something slick slid across his face. Smugness. The smile he wore when he believed time would do his dirty work. If you want to act like a selfish brat, he said softly, I'll do it my way. A chill traced my spine. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He just exhaled through his nose, flicked his eyes toward Mom as if she were a clerk, filing his final note, and walked out. Mom's shoulders folded. Clara, she said, why are you doing this? Doing what? Standing up for myself? He's just upset. But I was already walking to the door because in this family, explanations were always just debts restructured as apologies. That afternoon, I texted Ethan, my boyfriend, steady as an oak beam, the kind of man whose quiet presence made rooms feel larger. Dinner, he replied immediately. My place or yours? Yours. I need a normal night. I've got you. Ethan didn't ask for a download. He set a plate in front of me, poured water, and let the silence unclench my chest. When I finally told him everything, he listened without trying to fix what I wasn't asking him to fix. You're not wrong, he said at last. You're drawing a boundary they can't spend. I felt something soften in a line. I'm tired of paying to be loved. You don't have to, he said. Not with me. I slept for the first time in days. 2 mornings later, I pulled into my parents' driveway to pick up a box of old books Mom claimed she'd finally sorted. That's when I saw it. Dad's old sedan sitting there with a for sale sign taped to the inside of the windshield. Not just any car. My first car, bought when I was 19 with tips and overtime and pride. I hadn't driven it in years. True. I'd left it here when I upgraded. True. But it was mine. Heat flashed through me, quick and clean. I walked straight into the kitchen. Where's Dad? I asked. Mom turned, startled, eyes flicking past me, like maybe I'd brought a storm inside. He's not here. Why? I pointed back towards the driveway. He's selling my car. She swallowed. You don't use it. That's not the point, I said, the evenness in my voice more dangerous than a shout. It's mine. She tried for soothing. Your father thought since you're cutting ties, you wouldn't... I laughed. It came out bright and hollow. Right. Since I'm not funding Amanda's life anymore, he can sell my property. That's logic. her mouth pressed into a thin line, apology and loyalty warring on her face. I didn't wait for the winner. Outside, I tore the sign off the glass, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The engine gave a resentful cough, then a steady growl. I reversed out of the driveway and onto the street, pulse settling the farther I got from that house. My phone rang before I even reached the intersection. Dad. I let it buzz, then answered on the second call. Did you just steal from me? He barked. No, I said, calm enough to scare myself. I took back what's mine. That car's been sitting in my driveway for years, he said. You abandoned it. That makes it mine. That's not how ownership works, I said, merging into traffic. Try another story. A beat, then the sneer I knew by heart. You're out of the family now, aren't you? Why do you care what happens to junk in my driveway? It landed like a dare, like a shove, at the edge of a cliff he was sure I wouldn't jump from. I took a breath. If that's the way you want to play it, I said, game on. I hung up first. Back at my apartment, I parked the car like a trophy and sat with my hands on the wheel until the fury receded. He wanted chaos. He wanted me to spend the day unraveling. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. The next 24 hours were quiet. Suspiciously so. Then my mother's name lit the screen again, shock sharpening her voice. Your father, he took out a loan, she blurted as soon as I answered. A big one. He said he'd cover it, but... Mom, I said, I'm not his banker. I know. A breath. Just be careful. He's prideful right now. Prideful, I repeated, tasting the word like something spoiled. Right. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The decision felt like stepping into a dark room and trusting the light switch would be where it always was. I logged into the joint savings account Dad had insisted we keep for emergencies. I never used it. He'd called it a safety net. I'd called it a compromise to keep the peace. The number on the screen should have been comforting. Years of extra paychecks, holiday bonuses, the few generous months when life was kinder. Instead, my blood ran cold. The balance was wrong, not just dipped, gutted. I scrolled back, month by month, line by line, recurring withdrawals, transfers labeled Amanda tuition, Amanda rent, cash. Fees that bloomed and vanished like smoke. Transactions at times I knew I was at work or at home or anywhere but the bank. My last rational defense cracked. Maybe he just... No maybes. No stories to make cruelty polite. My hands were steady. I moved the remaining funds into my personal account. Then I closed the joint savings. Click, confirm, final. An ache pressed against my ribs as the confirmation screen blinked into place. Relief and grief rarely showed up alone. By evening, the phone started its drumbeat. Dad. 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 I ignored the calls. I wasn't ready for his voice, the righteous rage, the weaponized disappointment. Amanda, however, had a gift for persistence. Her text arrived like an invoice. I couldn't pay the rent. What do you want me to do? I stared at the words, at the way she'd made my choice into her emergency. Then I typed, Ask Dad. He said he'd take care of it. I hit send and turned the phone to silent. It stayed quiet until dusk when ordinary light turns into confession. I paced the living room once, twice, hearing my own footsteps instead of anyone else's judgment. For the first time in years, the space felt like mine, unmonitored, unbought. I sat on the floor by the coffee table and let the quiet mend a part of me I hadn't realized was torn. The next morning, around 10, I powered my phone back on. It convulsed with notifications. Missed calls from Dad, from Amanda, from Mom. A text floated to the top almost instantly. Amanda, you're unbelievable. Dad says he won't pay my rent. You put me in that situation. A laugh snuck out before I could catch it. I typed, I put you in that situation? Her reply was immediate, frantic. You knew I was counting on that money. Now I'm screwed. Are you really going to let me get evicted? For a moment, a thin, treacherous one, I felt the old instinct flare. Fix it. Pay it. Quiet the noise. Then I remembered the driveway, the sign, the empty account that used to be mine. Sounds like a you problem. Good luck with that, I wrote, and muted her. At 4 p.m, the front door of my building opened below my window. 10 seconds later, Mom's voice floated up the stairwell. Clara, he's here. Of course he was. I met him in the hallway. Richard's anger had calcified into something else. That sleek certainty again, the look of a man who believed he'd already set his trap. I told you, he said, voice too calm. I'd handle this my way. What did you do? He smiled without showing teeth. You'll see. I didn't sleep well. Not because I was afraid, but because the silence after a threat is its own kind of noise. I dreamed of taped signs and open glove compartments, of keys that didn't belong to me sliding into locks that did. Morning. Coffee. A list of small chores. On impulse, I opened my banking app again, not the joint savings. That was dead, but my primary checking. And there it was, the thing I'd hoped I imagined, the thing I knew, deep down, was real. Multiple transactions, multiple months, thousands missing from what should have been a fortress. Not just the joint account, my account. The breath left my body in one clean rush. I scrolled, then scrolled again, as if the numbers might realign if I stared hard enough. They did not. I set the phone on the counter like it had burned me and gripped the edge with both hands until my knuckles blanched. Through the kitchen window, the city kept moving. Buses shouldering their way down the street, a dog tugging a woman into a reluctant jog, the ordinary rhythm of people who weren't having their lives siphoned in daylight. I lifted the phone, opened the details, and saw the recurring pattern I couldn't unsee. This wasn't a storm I could outlast. It was a flood, and it had a name. When I looked at those transactions, month after month, line after line, it felt like being slapped by every year I'd tried to believe my father still had some decency left. He hadn't just borrowed, he'd built a pattern, a system of quiet theft, each withdrawal disguised as helping Amanda or keeping things steady. That night, I sat in the dark with the glow of my phone on my face, scrolling through every transfer until the truth became unbearable. He had been using my money for years, and I had never noticed, never questioned, never thought my own father would lie to me that easily. I closed the app, set my phone down, and whispered, "All right, Dad, you wanted a war." And I meant it. The next morning, I moved everything left in my account, every cent, into a new one he didn't know existed. Then, with a few clicks, I closed the joint savings for good. There was something cleansing about watching that screen blink, account closed. It felt like slamming a door in a haunted house. By noon, the messages started. Dad, what the hell did you do? Mom, Clara, please talk to him. He's furious. Amanda, did you just screw Dad over? I didn't reply to any of them. I wanted silence to be my answer. But at 9:47 that night, my doorbell rang. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. When I opened the door, there he stood. Richard Marin, veins raised, face red, fists clenched like a man used to control, but finally feeling it slip. What did you do? He demanded. I crossed my arms. I took my money back, just like I took my car. That was our account, he snapped. No, I said calmly. It was mine. You just helped yourself without asking. His nostrils flared. That money helped your sister. Oh, right, I tilted my head. Because you said she's better than me, right? So she'll be fine. For once, he had no comeback. His breathing was heavy. The quiet between us was dense enough to choke on. Then his voice lowered. Not with anger, but with something sharper. Do you really want to burn this bridge? I looked him dead in the eyes. You burned it first. Silence. Then he turned and walked away without another word. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, waiting for guilt, maybe regret, to seep in. But all I felt was relief. I thought that was the end of it. I thought maybe he'd finally understand that I was done being his provider, his scapegoat, his safety net. I was wrong. 3 days later, my phone exploded with missed calls from Mom. When I finally answered, her voice came through in a panic. Clara, your father's in trouble. I frowned. What do you mean, trouble? She spoke quickly, words tumbling out like she was afraid I'd hang up. He took out a loan, a big one, and now the bank is coming after him because he missed a payment. I blinked. A loan? How big? 30,000, she whispered. I almost laughed. You're kidding. He took out 30 grand and didn't tell me? He thought he could handle it, she said, pleading now. He used your savings as security, and now that you took the money out, he has nothing to pay it back with. I sat there, stunned. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd gambled with what was mine. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because he's desperate, Clara. If you could just... I cut her off. No, I can't just anything. He made his choice. Clara, please. I hung up. I couldn't listen to her justify it anymore. I should have known that was just the prelude. Because 2 days later, when I walked into my apartment, something felt wrong. The air was off. Too still. Too empty. My living room looked smaller. Then I saw it. The TV, gone. Laptop, gone. The shelf where I kept my watch collection, despair. My chest tightened. I ran to my bedroom, drawers open, jewelry box overturned, even a few of my clothes missing. There was no forced entry, no broken lock, no sign of a break-in, just absence. And then it hit me. Only 2 people had spare keys, Mom and Dad. My hands shook as I dialed his number. He answered after 2 rings, his tone already smug. "What do you want?" "Where are my things?" I demanded. A pause, then too casual. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," I said through clenched teeth. "Don't play dumb." He sighed. "If you're not going to help this family, I don't see why you need so many luxuries." "You stole from me," I hissed. "You took everything from Amanda," he shot back. "You emptied the account. You left us in a mess. I just made things right." My pulse hammered. "Where is my stuff?" "I pawned it," he said. No hesitation, no shame. "You what?" "Needed the cash," he said. "You should have thought about that before cutting us off." For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," and I hung up. He thought he'd burned the bridge? He had no idea. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where my TV used to be, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then I picked up my phone and called a lawyer. "Just a consultation," I said. "Family theft. I have proof." The lawyer's voice was calm, practical. "Do you have receipts? Serial numbers?" "I do." "And did he admit to it?" "Yes, over the phone." "Then it's simple," the lawyer said. "Press charges or threaten to. He'll fold." And that's exactly what I did. The next day, I called Dad again, this time on speaker, recording the call. "I talked to a lawyer," I said. "If you don't get me back every last item from that pawn shop, I'm pressing charges for theft." He actually laughed. "You wouldn't do that." "I would," I said. "And I recorded you admitting it last time. Want to test me?" Silence. For the first time in my life, I heard fear in his voice. "You're really going to put your own father in jail?" "You're the one who stole from me," I said. "So yes, I am." Another pause, then quietly, "I'll get the money." "You have 1 week," I said, and hung up. 3 days later, a transfer hit my account. Every penny. No note, no apology, just silence. And for the first time, I didn't need words. The transaction was apology enough. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked around my half-empty apartment. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was control. And after years of living under his version of family, that felt like a miracle. I didn't know it then, but that small, quiet victory, the one where I thought I'd finally won, was just the calm before the next betrayal. When the transfer came through, I thought it was over. $30,000 wired back into my account, a number that felt like both restitution and revenge. I stared at it for a long time, thinking, this is what peace must look like. But peace, in my family, never lasted long enough to believe in. For a few weeks, the silence held. No calls, no texts, no guilt disguised as love. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner for one, and learned how quiet could sound like safety. Ethan noticed the change immediately. "You finally look like you're breathing again," he said one night as we sat on his balcony, city lights flickering below. "Maybe I am," I said. "Or maybe I'm just waiting for the next fire." He reached for my hand. "If they try again, let it burn. Just don't walk back into it." I smiled, but something in me knew it wasn't finished. 3 weeks later, a letter came. Not an email, not a call. A letter, mailed in my father's handwriting, the one I used to recognize from childhood report cards. It was short, cold. "I expect you to return what you took. You've made this family look like fools. If you think I'll let you ruin us, think again. Richard." I folded the letter neatly and dropped it into the trash. But that night, I checked my locks twice. 2 days later, Mom called. "Clara," she said softly, "your father is trying to sell the house." I froze. "What?" "He says we can't keep up with the payments. He's talking about moving in with Amanda until things settle." "Until things settle," I repeated. "You mean until he finds another way to steal from me?" "Don't say that," she whispered. "He's under a lot of stress." "Mom, I said, stress doesn't make you a thief. Choices do." There was silence on the line. Then she said, "He's still your father." "And I'm still his daughter," I said. That didn't stop him from pawning my life. When the call ended, I didn't feel anger anymore, just exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones until even breathing feels like work. That night, as I sat by the window, I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their approval, paying bills to buy affection, funding dreams that weren't mine. Every transfer, every favor, every swallowed argument, all of it was currency in a system built on control. And for once, I realized I didn't owe them a single cent more. The next morning, I called my realtor. "I want to sell my apartment," I said. "Any reason?" "Let's just say it's time for a change of scenery." Ethan helped me box up the last of my things. "You sure about this?" he asked, taping a label to a stack of books. "Completely. I'm done living anywhere my father can find me." He gave me a small, knowing smile. "Then you're finally free." It took 2 months. 2 months of paperwork, appraisals, and goodbye dinners with coworkers who didn't know the half of what I'd survived. When the sale went through, I wired the deposit on a new place 3 states away. But just as I started to pack the last few boxes, Mom called again. Her voice was small, frayed. "Clara, it's your father," she said. "He's sick." I froze. Sick how? Stress, maybe, or guilt. "He's not eating, not sleeping. He keeps saying you've destroyed the family." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Mom, I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped letting him destroy me." "Can't you at least talk to him? Once?" I closed my eyes. "He made his choice, Mom. Now I'm making mine." That was the last conversation we had before I left. The drive out of town felt surreal, the highway stretching ahead like freedom drawn in concrete. I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I didn't have to. 2 months later, my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but the name flashing on the screen made my stomach twist. "Mom," I answered, bracing myself. "Clara," she whispered, voice trembling. "Your sister's pregnant." I blinked. "Amanda?" "Yes. Some boy from college. He left her. She's alone." I leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. The golden child, the perfect one, the one Dad had sacrificed everything for. Now she was the one abandoned. I didn't say anything. "Clara," Mom pleaded, "she needs help. Please. She's scared." I exhaled. "You mean she needs money?" "Don't say it like that. It's the truth." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, "She's better than me, remember? She'll figure it out." And before Mom could respond, I hung up. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea and watched the lights blink in the distance. For years, I'd thought leaving my family meant losing them. But I finally understood. Sometimes leaving is the only way to find yourself again. I'd spent half my life saving them from the consequences of their choices. Now, for the first time, I was letting them face it. And even though a small part of me still ached, for the mother who loved in silence, for the sister who never learned gratitude, for the father who mistook control for care, I knew I had nothing left to give them. As I packed the last box and taped it shut, Ethan came to the doorway. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "I think it finally is." He smiled, crossing the room to kiss my forehead. "Then let's go home." I turned off the light and left the apartment behind, the place where I'd lost almost everything, but learned exactly who I was. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry, just free. 6 months later, peace had a shape. It looked like sunlight spilling across a kitchen counter, like coffee brewed without interruption, like laughter that didn't come with guilt attached. I'd started over in a small coastal town where no one knew the name Marin. No shared accounts, no phone calls from home. Just me, my work, and a man who treated love as something given freely, not earned with sacrifice. Ethan and I built a quiet rhythm. Mornings meant walks by the water. Evenings meant stories told in half whispers and long, content silences. Sometimes, when he'd catch me zoning out, he'd ask, "You thinking about them again?" And I'd answer, only to remind myself what not to become. He'd nod, squeeze my hand, and say, "Then it's worth remembering." For the first time, I didn't live in reaction to anyone else's anger. I wasn't the daughter balancing budgets to buy peace, or the sister absorbing everyone's chaos. I was just Clara, a woman who'd survived the slow violence of expectation and come out breathing. But peace has a cruel sense of timing. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through a report when my laptop chimed with a new email. The subject line was simple. Hey, can we talk? The sender, Amanda Marin. For a long moment, I just stared at it. The name looked foreign, like a word in a language I'd forgotten. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading, but curiosity, that old, dangerous thing, won. I opened it. Clara, I know we've had our differences, but I need you to understand something. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I thought Dad would always take care of things, but he's gone now. Mom's barely managing. The baby's here. I'm scared, and I don't have anyone else. You don't owe me anything, but please, just talk to me. Love, Amanda. The room went still. Gone? I read the line again. Dad was dead. The man who'd spent his life controlling everything, even me, had finally lost control of the one thing none of us could bargain with. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because grief and relief are twins, and sometimes you can't tell which one's standing in front of you. Ethan came home an hour later and found me sitting on the couch, laptop open, eyes unfocused. He touched my shoulder. You okay? I turned the screen toward him. Amanda wrote. He read quietly, then looked at me. What do you want to do? I don't know, I said. Part of me wants to ignore it. The other part remembers being her. He sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee. You can care without reopening the wound. I closed the laptop. Maybe the best thing I can give her is silence. He nodded. Sometimes silence is mercy. That night, I dreamt of the old house, the one that smelled like burnt dinners and cold apologies. I saw Dad at the head of the table, Amanda glowing under the light, Mom pretending everything was fine. Except this time, I wasn't there. The seat where I used to sit was empty. And for the first time, it didn't feel wrong. It felt earned. The next morning, I opened my laptop again. The email was still there, patient, waiting. I hovered over the reply button. Then I clicked archive. Not delete, not reply, just away. Because some things don't need closure to be complete. Some stories end the moment you stop trying to rewrite them. I stood, poured a cup of coffee, and stepped onto the balcony. The sea breeze brushed my face. Below, the town stirred awake. Children laughing, shopkeepers unlocking doors, a dog barking somewhere down the street. Life, loud and ordinary. And in that moment, I realized something. My freedom didn't come from revenge. It came from release. I whispered it to the wind like a prayer. I forgive you, but you'll never touch me again. Ethan joined me, wrapping his arm around my waist. What are you thinking about? He asked softly. I smiled. How peace used to feel impossible. He pressed a kiss to my temple. And now? Now, I said. It feels like home. The sun rose higher, spilling gold across the horizon, and somewhere far behind me, in the ruins of the life I'd left, the noise finally stopped.